Hey everybody, Tom Gary here with Investor Loan Source and ILS Capital, and I wanted to do a real quick video here today to talk about interest rates. Here we are, the last day of November 2022, and the 30-year fixed is sitting somewhere just north of 6.5%. And as we all know in the real estate world, whether you're a lender or whether you're a broker, a realtor, a hard money guy, or a real estate investor themselves, interest rate matters, right? Interest rate really matters in real estate because it's such an interest rate intensive asset. So let's talk a little bit about rates. And, Thanksgiving, we had all of our family over, like most did, and we were standing around, and one of our family members there is a few years older than me, which means he's a younger baby boomer, right? Low 60s in age. Now, I'm like the oldest you can be without being a boomer. I'm the first year of that other generation just after the boomers called the Gen Xers. So I'm 57 years old. And the two of us were kind of chatting about interest rates, and we were chuckling at the fact that people today think interest rates are high. And what I believe about interest rates right now is we don't have an interest rate problem. We have an interest rate perception problem. And that has really slowed the real estate market. So I want to talk about some facts here and some statistics. I read an article recently on one of the news feeds that said new home sales are not tilting toward the higher priced buyer. When I dug into that article, it said that 48% of home sales were over $500,000 homes. Now, compared to a year ago, when over $500,000 homes only made up 33% of sales. So imagine that in 12 months, we went from 33% of home sales being $500,000 or more to 48%. Now, this is according to the Commerce Department numbers. So I got to thinking about that, and then I hearkened back to the conversation at Thanksgiving that I had, and I thought, I think I understand why. But I wanted to get some facts. I wanted to get some data to support or to quash my theory. And my theory was that people that are my age and older do not believe that interest rates today are so astronomical that we can't afford to go out and buy a home. But the younger generations, the millennials, they certainly do. And when we go to NAR, the National Association of Realtors, and take a look at their latest study of all the demographics, and if you've never done that, you really should if you're in the real estate industry. It will tell you demographic data that you didn't even know that existed out there. But what we find is that when home sales are broken down by generation, meaning the silent generation, which is my parents' age, in the 70s most generally, in the 70s to 90s, and then the boomers that are age 58 to 76 today. And then you break it down to Gen Xers, which are 43 years old to 57 years old. Or the Gen Y, or millennials, which are 24 to 42 years old. And then the Gen Zs, they are only 23 years old. The oldest ones are only 23 years old. So when we break that down, it's fascinating that the millennials are obviously, because of their age, the largest buyers of real estate today. They made up, over the last year, 43% of the home buyers. So 43% of all homes sold were sold to millennials. And that was overwhelmingly the largest number. The next number to that was the boomers at 29%. And then my generation, the Gen Xers, at 22%. Gen Z, the younger generation, they only made up 2% of home buyers so far. So the millennials make up almost half, 43%, of the home buys. Now, what was interesting too is the millennial homes that were bought averaged a price of $250,000, but my generation, the Gen X, bought the most expensive homes at $320,000. per house. The boomers were at 297, real close, and then the silent generation at 296. So all three of the older generations, the boomers, the silents, and the Xers, were all hovering in that 300 to 320 range, but the millennials were clear down at 250,000. So when you look at the buyers that purchased cash, now understand, somebody that's buying cash doesn't care what interest rates are because they're not using a loan. Highest cash buyers were the silent generation. 61% of the generation that is in their 70s to 90s purchased cash. And the ones that didn't, the 39% that actually financed, they came to the table with 30% of the purchase price in down payment. That was by far the highest in both categories. They were the highest to pay cash, and they were the highest down payment for those that didn't pay cash. The next generation down, the boomers, 72% of them financed their properties, but of the ones that did finance, they brought 25% cash in average. Gen Xers, my generation, we financed almost everything at 92% financed, but we brought 15% down. And the millennials, they financed 97% of their purchases and only brought 9% down payment. So when we take a look at that, we can see that the older the folks are, the lower the chance that they used financing, and the higher the chance that if they did use financing, they put more down. And then we also have the fact that the older generations spent more on their homes. But I still don't think that tells the whole story. I think the biggest part of this story is the perception of interest rate. Now let's take a look at the Fed numbers from the St. Louis Fed. We'll take a look at interest rates, and they've been tracking this since April of 1971 all the way to this month, November 2022. During that 51.5-year period, over half a century, the average interest rate on a 30-year fixed has been 7.76%. Let me say that again. Over a 51.5-year period, the average 30-year fixed interest rate was 7.76%, 7.75%. We're not even close to that. We're sitting as of yesterday at about 6.58%. We've still got more than a full percentage point to go to get to the average interest rate for a 30-year fixed loan over the last half a century. Now, if you want to look at the highs and lows, I thought this was fascinating too. December 2020 is the lowest interest rate on record in the last 51.5 years at 2.68% on a 30-year fixed. But if you want to look for the high, you go back to 1981 October at 18.4% on a 30-year fixed. I thought it was also interesting to look at the decade of the 80s. That entire decade from 1980 to 1989 averaged an interest rate for 10 years of 9.78%. So when people hear me say we haven't seen high interest rates yet, if you're younger than I am, if you're younger than 57 years old, you in your adult lifetime have not seen high interest rates. In fact, you in your adult lifetime have not even seen an average interest rate. What we have today is not an interest rate issue. It's a perception issue, because the largest cohort of buyers has never seen a normal interest rate. And they believe today, as I sat with some of them in my own family, our own kids and son-in-laws and so forth, they all thought that interest rates today were so high that if they were in the market for real estate, if they were in the market for a house, they would hold off. And I would say that that may be a mistake. That may be a mistake to think of it that way. So if you're a real estate investor today, don't pause your business because of interest rates. Don't not buy because of interest rates. If If you're a real estate investor, just buy your properties deep enough that the rate doesn't matter. Buy it deep enough that you can pay whatever the rate is today and continue to get that real estate, continue to build that wealth. Hope that was helpful for you, and hopefully that'll shed a little light on where we are on interest rates today. And by the way, people will always ask me, where do I think interest rates are going? Again, I'm a history buff. I love to go back and study data from past. And when we go back to the 80s and the late 70s, that's where we're going to find the environment that is closest to the one that we're in today. That environment is inflationary. We are in a heavily inflationary environment. Because of that, I believe interest rates necessarily will have to continue to increase. Now, where do they go? How far do they go? How long do they stay there? Or how quickly do they get there? I don't have a crystal ball, so I certainly can't answer. But I would expect that the 30-year fix today is sitting at 6.58. I would certainly expect that we have a ways to go before we get to the top, because we have an inflation rate that's well into the mid 7.5 range as a percentage point year over year. So until we can get that back down, we're going to see high interest rates, in my humble opinion. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't buy real estate. It doesn't mean we can't continue to grow our businesses and continue to grow our wealth. Hopefully that was helpful for you, and I will see you on the next video.